I've only just met Brittany recently, where we got to chat over Zoom, as you do, and was just impressed by what she had to say, particularly as it sort of falls in line with so much of my own thinking and how I was thinking for this conference. And so Brittany has been really finding ways of engaging with the community that she lives in. She's living in London, although she's American and they're flying off back there tomorrow. That I'm going to hand over to Brittany now, and we have pressed record.
All right,
That's it.
thanks. And I'm going to jump right in because I know that our time is short, but that we will have the Q&A on the app to continue to share questions if we don't get to it here. All right, so hopefully we can see that and you can see me. Yes, we're all good? Okay. So yeah, I don't know if you guys had a chance to listen in on some of the talks last night about the political climate in the UK here, and I'm sure around the world. But I was just, as Juliet said, we kind of started talking about what I was going to share, what was on my heart to share. And it really did fall in line in more of a really kind of grassroots level, because I didn't honestly know, like all that Randall was sharing, I didn't realize that it was so deep and wide, this issue of not only home education, but protecting parental rights. And so I think, in a small way, what we can do as individual families is to kind of spread the reality of what it means to, freely raise your children in a way that, where they can thrive and that benefits the family and actually benefits society. So, and that's what we'll be talking about. So, Undaunted, I think the word fear comes up a lot in parenting, and especially when you take it to another level of like media and home education. And I think there's just maybe the tendency to sort of shrink back and not want to be seen or not want to speak if that might cause somebody to question you. What are you doing? Do you have the right to do that? And all these like, oh, I don't know, maybe I don't. And but I think based on what we've heard and the climate right now, it's just, I think there's no better time for us to be bold in the way that we interact with the community. And I'll clarify what bold means, not necessarily, pounding people over the head with our agenda either, but confident in the way that we engage with our community. So let's see, I'm going to move you guys over here so I can. Just a little bit about us. We are in London right now. We came here from North Carolina in the States. And this is my crew. We've got 5. I did want to, if we had time, to talk kind of about big families at the end. There's a lot of chatter about like, okay, how do you use your family, especially a big family, to engage with anybody, especially if they're tiny, and so we can talk more about that. But we've got 5 right now. They're ages 15 down to 5. And we came here because of work. And an interesting thing, just thinking about community, there was also some chatter about being in a rural environment versus like an urban environment. So we actually, in North Carolina, we led a camp, like a summer camp, and lived in a little cabin on 75 acres in the woods, and had the lake and the streams, and it was just idyllic, right? And then we moved to London in obviously a very different sort of neighborhood. And so I think when it comes to connecting with community, there's place matters, and the fact that you're in your place is, I believe, for a reason. And so please don't hear like any of these ideas that we have that are very connected to our place here in London, that like, oh, I could never do that. I don't have those opportunities. It's just kind of really about dreaming about your your place and, knowing, okay, no, my place has these assets that I can use as well. And I'm in this place and I have gifts and assets that can be used as well. So we'll be talking about that. But I did want to mention that so my website, ourthrivinghive.com/community, I'm putting all of this on there and links and everything. So I'll put that on the comments or the Q&A section as well. And you can go back and look through all of this. So just for some clarity on terms here, community, I was reading this book called The Different Drum, or A Different Drum. And N. Scott Peck says this, defines community as this: a group of individuals who have learned how to communicate honestly with each other, whose relationships go deeper than their masks of composure, and who have developed some significant commitment to rejoice together, mourn together, and to delight in each other, making the other's condition our own. And I love that definition of community. And for the sake of our talk, when I'm talking about interacting with your local community, this is probably not what you have, right? Like with your neighbors. But I will say that if you, and as we as a family have engaged in our locality, so this is more of what I'm talking about, right? The people and places where we live, then ideally, it might foster into relationships which then would build into this idea of a true community, which I feel like is one of the most important things for human beings, that we live in community and we're allowed to. I love the idea of taking off our masks of composure. So instead of feeling like, oh, I need to know what to say so I can put my boxing gloves on and defend myself against this person who, doesn't like home education, I think what I'll be sharing is more of an invitation, like, hey, I'm going to take my mask off, and so you feel comfortable taking your mask off. And I think that's what we've found as we talk openly. We realize a lot of people are struggling, and a lot of parents want a better story for their own children and their own families. And I think home educators are really in a unique position where we kind of are outside of this institutional box, and we see the world with different eyes, and we see family and childhood with different eyes. And it's just a breath of fresh air, I think, that and a breath of hope that our localities, right, really need. So the two primary ways that I found that we can interact very practically with our locality, with the people and places around us, are by speaking and doing. And let me just make sure that all right. And once again, I think Juliet actually did a great job of mentioning this in the opening, in the intro yesterday, when she's like, the end game is not that we convert everybody to home education. I think, especially when it comes to engaging with the people around us, it's to build trust, to build relationship, and then ultimately to just bring a light of hope, I think, to the people around us. And this definition of trust, I've read this book, I think it's later on in the presentation, but it's called Abundant Community. And the author says this: trust grows from the experience of being together in ways that make a difference in our lives. So I think, one example that happened this week, there was a mother in our home ed community, and she had a 4-year-old. So they had kept her from going to nursery or something. But just recently she said, we're going to give school another shot. Well, up to this point, we had these conversations, and she was asking for book recommendations and reading, and just had a really solid understanding of what she wants for her daughter. And now they're going back into school, but I don't see that as like, oh man, we lost one to the institution. It's like I was able to tell her, like, okay, I wish that all parents who have their children in school had the mindset that you have of like, I need to set boundaries. I need to, this is my expectation. And as soon as it doesn't look like that, I have the freedom to pull them back out. Or so the end game, again, just building that trust and relationship. All right, so I did want to just mention here on our polls, I don't know if you guys took the poll, if you're a part of that, but the poll for this session was, which best describes you when it comes to talking about others in the community about home education? And it went from, we don't go out during school hours because I don't want to have to answer any questions. Only one person said that, so then that's good. But the bulk of the people, the answer that won was, I'll happily engage in a conversation about home ed if asked, but I'm not the one to bring it up. And then there was also a lot of like really go-getters that said, it's my mission to make sure everyone I meet knows all about home education. So based on that poll, I feel like I am talking to those who either like really want to be proactively talking about home education and freedom in education in general, or those who are comfortable at least having a conversation. So that means that we need some situations to give us that opportunity. So like I said, there's speaking and doing, 2 ways to engage with our community. Speaking, know who you are talking to. I think this is probably key in any conversation that we're having with anybody, but if we're talking especially about a topic that could potentially get heated or tricky, or it's an emotional topic, we need to know who we're talking to. And so we get to know them by asking their stories or by asking good questions. And one of the documents actually that I uploaded on this course is a list of kind of questions. It was a discussion that I threw out there. So if there's other questions that you have, but I think, let's see here. Okay, this is kind of what it looks like, right? Just some of those questions that, and there's a PDF that you can kind of print out or make bigger on your own device as well. Questions that are more like philosophical and what is education for? I think Juliet threw one in there on the discussion. It was, do you think you learn more when you were in school or after you left school? Who are your favorite teachers? What is the role of a teacher? Are teachers necessary for learning? And so I think getting their story and knowing who you're talking to, then it's like, okay, that kind of prepares me for how I'm going to engage with you. Because if you have a background in education, if you're an head teacher, if you're an artist, that's very different, right? If I'm talking to the ex-head teacher and then the next conversation is with a free spirit artist, like they're gonna get what I'm talking about in 2 very, very different ways. And so trying to establish who am I talking to and being really sensitive to their story and their background as you confidently proceed and humbly proceed with your story and your background. And I will say that when you start asking questions, of course, it often prompts at least the same question in return. So, I mean, I'm sure you've all been there, right? Like if you're talking to a parent and there's a dull moment in the conversation, like the question that's asked, so where do your kids go to school? And that's always the question. I mean, and to be honest, sometimes if I get nervous in a conversation, I ask, so where do your kids go to school? Just assuming that they do. And but knowing that, okay, the more questions we ask, the more, their mask can sort of come off, my mask can come off, and we can have a legitimate, real conversation. All right, let's see. So not only do we know who we're talking to, but we need to know who or what we're talking about. And again, all of these, I have links to all of these different things on the website, but really thinking through yourself. I think the more grounded we are in knowing why we're home educating and how children learn best and what the core of my family is all about, what the mission of our family, what is the philosophy of not only education, but how my family does life, like all of those things. I think when we're really grounded in that, then it becomes a lot easier to listen with those ears of like, well, I hear you, but you know, this is kind of how my family has chosen to do this thing, or this is kind of the core, the root of who we are. And so I early on kind of wrote out a couple of things. One was how I define success for my kids, like when they leave as adults, like what would make a successful grown-up kid, you know? And so basically the two very simple things that I think of in my mind to articulate is like, you know what, we want them to be privately happy and publicly responsible. It's like if they can be those things, and then on my, you know, and actually wrote out like what that meant. And but it's an easy way to communicate to people, like when I ask, well, what do you think is a successful education? Like, this is what we've come up with after really thinking through. And I think what I found, guys, is like when people hear, oh, you've actually like, you've thought about this. You know, you're not just like, you know, yesterday you made this decision and you have no idea what you're talking about. And when they actually hear like, oh, okay. Or when you say, actually, I get that question a lot, then hopefully there's something going through their mind like, oh, okay, so this isn't the first time you've talked through this. And so yes, knowing what you're talking about. There's a discussion on the chat for this group about your elevator speech. And I think in general, these are again, there's one that you can blow up. But basically, what I did was there are conversations that continue to repeat themselves over and over and over and over. And they kind of fall into these, right? Like, are you a teacher? Well, I happen to have an education background. I was a former teacher. And so that's an easy one for me. But, you know, asking about who their favorite teacher was, or what is the role of a teacher really? And so is it legal? I've gotten that one a lot, even from people right here in London that assume once their kid is 5 that they didn't know that it was legal after that. And I especially after COVID, I thought, well, surely that question is going to disappear because, you know, everybody knows what home education is. No, that's not the reality at all. If we follow a curriculum, I have a neighbor that's from France. And I don't know much about the French education system, but from what Randall shared last night, it fit with what she was describing, you know, her idea of, you know, well, do you follow a curriculum? She was the one that asked me this question. I thought, well, families are free to follow a curriculum, you know, so giving and taking, even though we don't necessarily follow a lot of curriculum, families are free to do so. So again, meeting somebody where they are, to allow the conversation to go forward. How do they socialize? Of course, we've gotten that one a million times, right? Have an answer for that one. This was a great one. I could never stay home with my kids. Have you guys gotten that one? The classic, this was so great, this story. My kids were enrolled in a band camp in London. And we happened to meet one of the other the other kids was in the same train car as we were on the way down. And so we introduced ourselves and started talking, of course, like, where do they go to school? And we homeschool. And so in this, you know, whatever, 20 minutes that we had to get there. And so I kind of talked it through, and he, like a lot of people do at the end of the conversation, he's kind of like, huh, wow, okay, well, I could never do that. And so it wasn't like he was opposed to it. He's just kind of like, that's great for you, but no thanks. And so it happened to be, it was February half term, right before lockdown, the first lockdown in March. And so I don't know why, you know, it just, when lockdown happened, I had a flashback to this conversation, and I thought, oh my word, to be a fly on the wall in his house right now. I thought, Oh, so hopefully they survived it. But university, what about university? And so having an answer about what happens when they get older. Again, what defines success? And recently I was asked by one of our delivery guys if we liked home education. Do you like it? So just be honest, I guess, when you're asked that one. And of course, guys, there's always this idea, right? If we're in a hurry and someone asked our kids, which happens, right? Oh, are you guys on holiday? Then just say, yep, and just keep walking, right? So there is that too, that we have to kind of know our limits and how much time do we have and how much energy do we have emotionally and physically to actually keep having these conversations. So no, you don't have to have a conversation with every single person. Now, when the conversation gets tricky, this is what I found to be true, I think. Whenever there's a little bit of friction or pushback on some of these things that I'm saying, and you can hear it right away, like defensiveness in somebody's voice. What I've kind of thought through is, stay cool, don't take it personally, because I think what's happening is that parents need to be validated in their own decisions and in their own education backgrounds as well. And so if I'm bringing this idea that is like totally foreign, and they've invested time and money and energy into their kids' education, and for me to say, or for them to hear, you're doing it wrong, like my way is better, then that's going to cause immediate like friction, right? And so to know, okay, they're not attacking me, maybe they're just having to deal with stuff like that, their choices. And so stay cool, stay humble, admitting that we don't have all the answers. And a lot of times I'll kind of say, if I'm backed sort of into a corner, then it's like, you know what, we're doing right now what we know is best for our family and children. Like, we take a look at it every year, we reevaluate, and we go from there. So for people to kind of understand, like, oh, okay, good. This isn't like necessarily a forever thing. Like, you're going to keep looking at it and reevaluate. Like, for some reason, that gives people assurance that, like, I haven't laid down the law and I can never return or something. So, and then it's okay to walk away. Of course, there's going to be times when, like, I guess we just have to agree to disagree and walk away, and no hard feelings, but you just, yeah. So yeah, that's available on the, oh, and there we go. When things don't go as planned, stay cool, humble. It's okay to walk away. When you're pulling out your hair inside, but keeping your mask of composure on, like we all do, right? Okay, so that's kind of about saying, and again, I could go over like a bunch of stories about different conversations that I've had. But the doing is what we've kind of had fun. I don't know if you all are Princess Bride fans here. I love it. Okay, good. That's great. I thought maybe I'm the only one, but my kids would be super embarrassed actually if they saw this slide. They're like, Mom, you quote every single day. There's a Princess Bride quote that you have. It just fits every situation. So I love this scene, of course. Why didn't you list that among our assets? So when we want to speak and we feel like we have just these empowering words to give to families, like sometimes we just need a platform to be able to use our words. And we just need people to talk to about what we have in our minds and hearts, and we're excited. And so the doing is the portion that connects us with people. And our children, I think it's on the next slide here. Here we go. Okay, so our assets. This is an idea that I've been reading a lot about, and it makes so much sense. I mean, my whole career, my husband's whole careers have been in like the service industry. So I was a teacher, he was a teacher, we were coaches, we led camp. So people pay us to provide a service for their kids, right? And so this is very counterintuitive to like the way that I was raised in a bunch of programs, and we pay for these things and go to a million activities. And then we grew up to be those people who did the same. this book really talks about, the assets in our locality, right, in our community, and using those to build relationships and to meet the needs of the people in that place. And so, I mean, as home educators, when I read this book, it's like, gosh, we are at such an advantage because, one, we can tap into the individual assets of our family, our own, our own strengths, our own interests. And so when I talk about assets, right, I'm talking about how are we gifted? What are we into? What are we interested in? What are our strengths? And I think a way that the book described it is like, our head, heart, and hands. So what do we know? What are we passionate about? And what can we do? What skills do we have? So in each of these three realms, that's what we're thinking of. So if you think about each one of your children, and I'm just so blessed to be able to speak this into my kids, and so are you, right? That like I see the distinct, unique person that they are and the unique interests that they have. And they've been able to be used in our neighborhood and in our community to link people and to link people together. So thinking about individuals, your family as a whole, if you think back to that core of who your family is, you are in that place for a reason to provide something to the people around you. And I think, again, it's not an accident that you are in that place for a reason, wherever you are. And then your greater locality, meaning your neighborhood, your city. We live in Ealing in West London. And so when you think of Ealing, I think of like parks and Ealing studios, film, art, music, like these kind of things are our strengths. And so to connect people and businesses and artists and professionals together is not just benefiting home educators, it's benefiting the community as a whole. And this is what we've been able to do. All right, so how do we put our assets to work, meaning in each of those three entities? And I've kind of broken it down into three categories, but I'm sure there's more. So filling a need, celebrating, and inviting people to simply join us in what we're already doing, or joining others in what they're already doing. And just one quick note, because I think I saw on some of the discussions about, I live so far away from my other home ed community, like I have to drive an hour to the meetup or whatever. Okay. What I found in this that is really cool is that, yes, we do need to be around other home educators. I think there's a benefit. But what I've seen is that, when we start connecting with the people immediately around us, even if they're not home educators, that a lot of times provides for the same needs that my family had as far as friends, socialization, like my need for community. So it kind of takes care of that as well, and gives us a platform to be able to share about how we do life, how we do education. So kind of opening our sphere to like, oh, that's true. I don't need to just hang out with home educators. Like there's a community around me that I can tap into. So, okay, I need to move you guys around again. There we are. So filling a need. So these are some of the things. And again, on our website, there are links to like how we did these more specifically, because I'm already saying we only have 15 minutes. So clothing or a book swap. This was one that came out of a need that we had. We have 5 children and now we live in London, and we, came from a place where we inherited the clothing from like a family with 6 girls. So it was just like, we never had to think about where do you get your clothes. And the charity shops here were sparse, especially for kids' clothing. And so I thought, well, surely we can do something. Like other families are in this boat. And so we hired out a haul, put the word out there. People dropped their clothes off. We sorted it out by size and then invited people to come and swap. Well, that was great. We did it again, and it happened to be during like one of the weird lockdown like openings during the lockdowns, So we had a little bit more freedom, but we couldn't be inside. So I asked all the neighbors on my street if it was okay if we put the clothes like out on the pavement in front of the houses, and basically hired all the kids on the street to be my workers, which they took so seriously. And like, it went off better than we had it in the hall, you know, when we had hired out the hall. And it was free because we didn't have to hire out the hall. Because before I was having to like ask for donation, like for a little 2 or 3 pounds to cover the cost of the hall. So you just stumble into these things, right? And if it's really through that experience, it taught me, oh my goodness, like these kids really want to be empowered, and they don't have this chance, even more than my kids. The kids on the street, none of them are homeschooled. So they don't ever have a chance to really like do things like this, because again, they've got a schedule to keep and they've got places to go and activities to. So it was fun to bring them into that. Another, I think, do I have a picture? Let's see. Okay, here we go. So that's our street right there. And so we kind of lined up the clothes all the way down the street. There was a need for a story time. Our local library turned into a community library, and they were looking for somebody who could do online story time. And for almost a year, these two girls and I, we did our online story time and made some really neat connections with just moms of little ones in the community, not necessarily home educators. And then the picture below, so one of my daughters, who is in the crown and the wig and the mustache, she's Macbeth in this photo. She loves acting, and of course all of the drama stuff was closed down during COVID, and so she asked all the neighbors if they wanted to be in a Macbeth play. And it was very like, it was a kid's version, but it was really Shakespeare-y. Like they had to memorize a lot of lines. And the best thing, this house that you're seeing right here, there's a 19-year-old boy who was furloughed from his job. He ended school, I think he did A-levels in drama or something. And so he didn't really have anything to do. And they wrote out a little note, and kind of like one of those, do you love me? Yes, no. But it was like, will you direct our play? Check yes or no. And they put it through his mail slot. And this sweet 19-year-old boy said yes. And so for more than a month, they worked on and then pulled off this show. So, but that was filling a need for my daughter, and, just inviting others into it. All right, celebrating. We love to use any little random holiday as a way to celebrate. Last year's VE Day was awesome. We connected with a lot of, and I didn't realize that VE Day wasn't like that every year. I just assumed like a couple of weeks ago we were going to have a big party again, but no, that was just the 75th, I think. So National Poetry Day, we kind of put a word out there to do like an open mic spoken word poetry, and invited a local artist here in Ealing who does spoken word, and he shared with us, and the kids got to share their own poetry. Arts, so going back to kind of like the core of who we are, arts is important to my family, to me. And so you could probably see this going through, but like your ideas are going to be totally different, right? If you're like, oh my gosh, I could never do poetry and art and stuff, like, no, you got your thing to do, and it's for a reason, again. But we did a poetry walk. It's called a sound walk. There's this Echoes app. You can do it in your community as well. We had home educating kids record themselves do a spring poem, and they were brilliant. They were great. And you just geolocate them into this app, and then they can go and find, once you're standing on top of their poem, it like reads automatically. So that's fun. And I actually, I used it as an opportunity to, I sent it to Ealing, to our council, just tagged everybody that was related to government kind of, and I didn't get a lot of response, but for them to see. And on the app itself, there's a description, and I linked, if you're curious, because I said, this was created by a group of home educating kids. If you're curious about what home education is all about, like click here and I have a page that sort of explains who we are. And so maybe nobody will look at it, but it's kind of, again, that mentality. Are we going to shrink back, or do we just say, hey, we're here? For some reason, over the last weeks I've been preparing this, you know, that Dr. Seuss, like Horton Hears a Who, like, we are here, we are here. That's kind of the vision that I had in my mind of, like, you know, we're the little Who's, and it's sort of like there needs to be a Horton that kind of like, you know, says we are here, or just shows the world like, hey, all these people are actually here. And so so that's our role, to be Hortons for the Who's. Very recently I hosted a film called Chasing Childhood. And this was a really, really neat way to engage with parents in the community and teachers and administrators. It really brought out a lot of conversations. And again, there's a link to that film. But any film that has to do with parenting, schooling, kids, like, it's just a way to build a bridge. Think about how can I build a bridge from this issue, which everybody cares about, to kind of what I really care about. And it just gives you another excuse to do that. So maybe hosting a film for your community. I did it all virtually, it was all online, and then we met to do a discussion online. So that can be done very easily. Okay, we've done, oh, here's the pictures. Let's just do that, because we've got to fly through. Okay, yeah, this is our Secret Santa on our street. We're American, so we do celebrate Thanksgiving, and that was new for our street. And so basically my kids, they cut out leaves and then they painted this tree and stuck it to our front door. And then took the leaves, about 5 leaves, and just like put that with the directions on in everybody's mail slot on our street, and said, hey, this is, you know, we celebrate Thanksgiving. If you'd like to participate, write something that you're thankful for and stick it up on the thing. And there was many more than this. I was shocked that people, like, and they took it really seriously, like, about what they were thankful. And this was November 2020. So right in the heart of all of the COVID stuff. And I mean, it just was a really neat reminder that, wow, we have a lot to be thankful for. So water fights, that was VE Day, that the water fights. And then we partnered with a cafe in our town. I was looking for a place, again, filling that need, right? Celebrating. I was looking for a place where our kids could just kind of do a recital, but I realized that it's not a thing really here. And so I was looking for a hall to hire or something. We were walking past this cafe and I saw a piano in the corner. So I went up to the owner. I said, does that piano work? And he said, yes, do you play? And I said, no, but I have an idea. And he was just brilliant. He's like, this is he was from Spain. It's like, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to start this, to gather people together in this way. So he basically had 10 kids, I think, that got to perform, and it was a really low-key environment. He stayed open, no charge to us. He had his full menu, wine. And it was such a neat environment. The kids loved it. He loved it. We can't wait for us to be able to do it again. That was right before lockdown last year. Okay, finishing up here. Inviting others to enjoy us in what we're already doing. This is, I don't know why it was such a revelation to me, right? Like, if I'm going to the museum, like, bring somebody on the street with me, or ask them, it's like, I'm going there, what, you want to come? Or I want to read these books, do you want to read them with me? So I think, and it works both ways, right? If somebody's doing something that you see, like, oh, wow, can I join you in that? That looks really cool. Yeah, that's the easy one, right? Because we don't have to do anything to, like, create it. We do, this also came out of COVID, this neighborhood newspaper that about killed me because we had to send it out yesterday and we're leaving tomorrow. But this has been such a neat way to have others contribute as well. What I found is that, you don't have to be the one that does all of the the doing, right? There are other people who are just waiting to be asked to do something, to have some sort of role, a sense of belonging in their locality, right? So like one of the things we always talk about is birthdays on our street. And so there's this elderly woman that lives at the end of the street, and I kind of gave her the role to keep track of birthdays. And so it's her mission. I mean, to, she's the first one on our little WhatsApp chat, like, happy birthday, whoever, or like, I don't have the birthdays for number 52. Can you guys send me your birthday? It's just, and it's great because she, she lives by herself, but we know, we kind of, we're able to check up on her and know that she's there. Okay. And these were just some other photos of our street. I mean, just like the ice cream truck, right? Just thinking through, okay, buy the kids on the street ice cream. I don't know, if you're willing to make that investment, or let your kids buy ice cream, which we're sort of always like, no, guys. But it's just one more opportunity to connect with neighbors, to connect with the people around us. Yeah, and they did another drama production that was all on Zoom, which was fabulous, and the neighbors all came. Oh, 2 minutes, thank you. So back to the beginning. The end game is, of course, not to just do a bunch of cool stuff, right? Like, we can organize all these things and create all these whatever connections and be like, awesome, aren't I amazing that I can do all this stuff? Well, no, not if there's not a good reason behind it, I guess, at least in my mind. And that is to build trust with the people in our community, to grow the relationship so that they can hear a different narrative, a different story for their families and their kids. So again, there's that ourthrivinghive.com/community. It has all of the links to all of the different examples. And yeah, I think that's it for now. That was a lot of information. So do ask the questions in the, in the chat. I'll be looking at that on the app, or contact me if you have questions about any of the individual things. But I just really encourage each of you to use your gifts and your family's gifts and the gifts of your location to just dive in right where you are, and don't think that, yeah, I can't do that thing, because maybe you're called to do a completely other thing, but perhaps it was this time that got your brain firing to think of ways, how do I speak to others, and what will I do in order to create this sense of community and give me a platform to share. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Brittany. I think that was really helpful and encouraging. I think all of us, it can be challenging sometimes engaging with your community, but I can see there's a lot of appreciation from people who've joined this session, and certainly food for thought. And I think it's one of the things that's so important is that we expose more people to home education as a normal, good, positive thing. Because we need those people on our side as the challenges come up. And it's not, as you say, it's not just about home education, it's about also just encouraging parents, other parents that are in this journey with you, to be empowered to make good choices that work for their children, whatever those are.
Yeah.
But they come to regard you as a friend and not as competition.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, one of my best friends lives on our street, and she also has 5, but they go to school. And I can't tell you how many people she's referred to me, like, this family, they're struggling, they're thinking about home education. Can I send them to you? And so, once they know, okay, they're doing it this other way, it's not for me necessarily, but I know who to talk to. Like, you can be that person, right? So I think,
That's great. Thank you so much, Brittany. If anyone wants to give her a round of applause. And we are going to end the session now. So thank you so much.